Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Chris Edwards, and in this video I will give a brief introduction to Plotly, an open source graphing library. Plotly has libraries for Python, R, and JavaScript. In this video we'll focus on the JavaScript library. Plotly JavaScript is built on top of D3 and Stack, and it has over 40 chart types, and additionally it is free and open source. The documentation includes many tutorials and examples of different chart types and chart features. These include basic charts, statistical, scientific charts, financial. It can do maps and 3D charts, and then there are additional features including subplots, custom chart events, transforms, custom controls, and animations. We won't go over it in this video, but there's also a React component. This video will cover the basics of creating a chart and show 4 different chart types. Each chart that I've created was based on tutorials from this documentation. Let's begin with the basic building blocks for any Plotly chart. First, we have the name of the HTML div where the plot will be created. This can be specified with a string that matches the ID of the div. Second is the data. This is an object or an array of objects that holds the data traces and their properties. This is also where the chart type is specified. Third, the layout object is optional, and it holds additional properties for formatting the chart, including the chart title, axis properties, and legend options, and more. The configuration object is also optional, and it specifies additional Plotly features. First, we will create a basic line chart. As a side note, the link for each CodePen in this video is found below. In the HTML header, we import Plotly from the CDN. In the body, we create a div with a unique ID. This is where the plot will be generated. For each example in this video, the HTML code is exactly the same, so now we will focus on the JavaScript code. For each example in this video, we will read data from a CSV file. You can read the data however you want, you just need to import it into arrays correctly. Here is the CSV file for the first line chart. We have first column of dates, and then the second and third columns are the series, A and B. It is important to have a header row in your CSV files to specify the name of each column. Back to the code, this first function, plot from CSV, will read the CSV file and extract the data into an array of objects, and each object has one row of data. Then we call this next function called process data, where we take this array of objects and pull out each series of data. So first we create empty arrays for each of the data series, one for X and one for each of the Y series. Then we loop through the array and populate each of the individual data set arrays. We can see the results over here in the console. Here's the X data set with each date, and then the Y1 data set with the values for the corresponding date. This function then calls makePlotly, which will use these 3 arrays to make the chart. First, we need to specify the traces. You can think of each line as a trace that will be on our line chart. So for each trace, we specify the X and Y series, the name of the trace, and then we can give it the line properties. And here's the trace for the second series. Next, here's the layout object, and here we specify the title, and then properties for the Y and X axis. Then lastly, we have the configuration array, which in this case we have one configuration option set, which is the responsive chart. I'll explain that more in a minute. Now let's uncomment this code to generate the plot. Again, we put in the name of the div, and it will find it on its own. And here's our basic line chart. Each Plotly chart has many built-in features. There's a zoom tool, a pan tool, you can auto scale, reset the axis, and there's multiple options for hovering over the data. There are also additional features in the code that we can create. For example, we can create a dash line in the traces array. We can specify that this line is dashed. As far as the axis goes, we can specify the format of the date. So I'll change that with this code. And then there are additional configuration options that we can do. This first one is responsive. So right now you can see that as we change the width of the page, the chart automatically updates. If we turn that off, it will make it a default width, and then as we move the page, it doesn't update. You can also make a static plot. This will remove all the hover options that we showed earlier if you just want to have a single plot that can't be changed. You can also make it so your plot is editable by the user. So in this case, we can come in here and change the title. We can add names for the axes. And we can even change the series name. Additional configuration options can be found at this link here. Another thing I forgot to mention was in this loop, it is important that we use the exact name of the header row as shown in the CSV file, date A and B, date A and B. Here's an example of a box plot which shows the spread of a given data set. Again, we're reading from a CSV and we're importing the data in the exact same way we did for the last plot. Only this time, instead of having an X series, we just have 3 Y series. And again, we call the correct column when we're looping through the data. When we create the traces, we specify the chart type. The default is line, so we did not have to do that in the last example. But here we specify the type to be box. We do the same for each series. Hovering over the chart, we see the stats for each series. We can see the median, the quartiles, the max. Here we show the outliers on these two because there are outliers. There are some additional features for box plots. We can show the mean value. We can show all the points in addition to the box plot. And we can also control whether or not to show the outliers. Some other layout options that we can play with are the grid lines. As I uncomment this code, we'll change the grid color, the grid width, and the zero line width. This is the zero line width at the bottom, and these are the grid lines. There are many other layout options, and you can play with those as you look through the Plotly documentation. This is an example of a dot plot. Again, we import the data from a CSV file, import it, loop through the data to pull out the data series that we want, and format the traces in the layout. In this case, we wanted to have markers, not lines, so we set the mode to markers, and then we can set the marker options here. This line attribute is for the marker, not the actual line on the graph. And we set similar properties for each marker. And then in the layout, we were able to set a background color, specify our axis range, our tick format. We changed the title to bold and set a font color. The chart shows popular college majors and the average salary with a certain amount of experience. The gold is 0 to 5, and the green is 10 plus years of experience. As you hover over a point, it gives you the specifics for that data point. Another layout option we can change is moving the legend. The default is to put the legend to the right of the plot, but we can move it above the plot like this. The last example that I'm going to show you is a 3D plot. The 3D plots with Plotly are really cool because normally a static 3D plot is really hard to interpret and it can be really confusing. But Plotly makes interactive 3D charts that you can rotate and look around so you can understand the data. Let's look at the CSV file for this plot real quick. We just have the first column is the X coordinate going down to 20, and the top column is the Y coordinate, and then we have the Z value, or the elevation in this case. In this example, we put all the code for making the plot into one function instead of splitting it up. So first we read the CSV, and then we extract the Z data. And then we set up the data. This is where we had traces in the other examples. Since we only have one trace, we just called it data. And we specify the type as surface. Here are some of our layout options. Plotly also has built-in color scales that you can use. And the link to those is right here. But now this plot will be created on a blue to yellow scale. And again, there's different options for how to rotate the plots, zooming in and out. These 3D charts aren't too common, but they can be really helpful for displaying certain types of data. Well, that is all I have for this video. Remember to check out the Plotly documentation to learn more, and thanks for watching.